Guys, we are talking almost exclusively about Universal with my friend Alessandro.
Yes.
So, sir, could you tell us a little bit about who you are, your journey in watches, and how you ended up on Universal?
So my name is Alessandro, known on Instagram as Mr. A. I'm a lover, collector, passionate person when it comes to mostly watches, but let's say it all started with UG for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm probably one of your earliest online fans.
I appreciate
Started
that.
back in, I think, 2010.
Yeah.
You still had the more simple layout website.
Yeah.
It was just you and a bunch of people, and I remember reading a lot about watches and, falling down the rabbit hole. And then just one day I found out about UG, and it just exploded on me. It's this crazy brand, these crazy designs, and then everything just started rolling.
Yeah.
Fell in love with the brand, started collecting a few pieces here and there, and then here we are.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been almost 15 years, half of my life.
That's wild. That's,
can you imagine that?
From a percentage perspective, that's a lot more than my life. I've
Yeah,
only been doing
but-
this for 15 years or 16 years, and I'm much older than you.
Not much.
But so tell me a little bit about what attracted you to Universal from the beginning, and then we can obviously talk about the watches on the table.
Of course.
But what was like the first Universal that caught your eye?
I think it was the Tri-Complex. There was one in Milan that I saw on a website.
Yeah.
I was like, oh wow, I want to check it out. And it was crazy. I could just see a picture, then go to the shop and actually have it in my hands.
Yeah.
But the condition was rough.
And you knew that even back then?
Sort of like, you take and you're like, oh, it's cool, but like, I think there's nicer models out there. I think that just flipped the switch, and I'm like, maybe I can find something better. But that's the worst thing. It's like when you're like, I can find better. So then there's no limits to what you can find.
Right.
And then it just started rolling and rolling. And I think to me, UG was this brand that not a lot of people spoke about at the time, but had so many different designs. You can have 100 UGs and they all look completely different.
Completely different, yeah.
And I think I'm quite design driven and definitely more on aesthetics and on quirky details rather than, collecting marks of dials and stuff like this.
Yeah.
So to me, as, a personality trait, I felt like I could find a watch that would match my style much more than, your run-of-the-mill sub that, everybody knows what you have.
Yeah.
So I think that was I felt like with UG, I could find something that spoke only to me,
Right.
and I could make it my own, rather than just have something that speaks to everybody.
Yeah.
I think that was the main attraction.
And I think also, so you're based in Italy, obviously.
Milan, yeah.
Milan. And so you have the rare opportunity, and it was a challenge for me, obviously, and all of us in the US really, to see good vintage watches in person. The only time that I could do it, I would go to Antiquarian previews. And back then, estimates for a watch like this would be 600 to 800.
Sure.
And it was just something that you really didn't have access to. So how do you think growing up in Milan shaped who you are as a collector and your view of Universal?
So funny enough, I would say because of you and what you did with internet, you made certain informations available to a younger clientele, like younger generation of kids that, for example, at the time, obviously you're 13 years old, you don't really have the means to buy these things.
Yeah.
So it meant I did a lot of research online, and I would know a lot about the different models and stuff. So then when I would see them in person, I'd be much more informed. And after, you'd know more than the seller because you've just researched that online.
Yeah.
There are quite a few collectors in Italy that I had, the privilege. Instagram was a major opening device.
Yeah.
Like I got to meet a lot of collectors, people that would be really nice and invite me over and say, hey, I know you like your cheese, come. I bring a couple pieces, they bring a couple, so that really helped. There's a few cool shops in Milan that had a bunch of our good friend Max.
Bernardini.
Yes,
Yeah.
he had a beautiful,
Legendary Max Bernardini.
You shot an amazing episode also with him.
Yeah.
So that helped, and I think in Europe we do have quite a lot of big collections of beautiful watches, so that maybe helped. But I would actually say the opposite. I didn't learn as much at the beginning on the field. It was more of a online exercise that then when I felt like, okay, I'm ready, then I went around the world looking for these pieces.
And what was the first Universal that you bought?
A Paul Ruder.
Yeah.
It was a black dial.
That's where we all begin.
I swear it's like the best stepping stone. It was a beautiful glossy, still have it, on bracelet, beautiful watch. Few $100.
$200, yeah.
Yes.
Those were the good old days.
Oh
you know?
my God, I miss them.
Yeah.
It's the 215 movement, so early micro rotor,
Yeah.
beautiful, glossy, everything you ever would want or would need in a watch.
Yeah.
And then it just snowballed. And then I got into complications and,
Other stuff.
other stuff.
Yeah. So tell me about this puller ribbon right here.
So this is it's one of these very odd balls. It's an enamel blue dial pawn router on this funky bracelet. So these dials have surfaced. There's quite a few of them, but this one in particular comes from like really the first owner, and it has a really obscure sub-reference that not even the guys who wrote the book have identified. So in my mind, it's one of the few ones that are born like this.
Yep.
Comes with this crazy bracelet, which is like an oyster style JB Champion.
Yeah, I've never seen that bracelet.
Never seen, but it's fully original. It comes from Italy. And I bought it as lapis. I knew the dealer who had it. He bought it from the first owner because we were both trying to buy it from that guy.
Yeah.
This dude posted a picture on Instagram. He's like, from my grandfather. I messaged him. This guy was faster than me. He drove there, bought it. And then he messaged me. I was like, I was trying to buy it. Let's find a deal.
Yeah.
He's like, no, I don't think I want to sell it. And then years later, he finally gave me a call and he said, okay, you can have it. I think it's one of those ego things, like, okay, you want it and then you finally have it. But it's cool because it's a lapis, but it's really enamel with these flaky things. It's just an interesting dial variant.
So the dial is enamel?
It's enamel, yeah. It's strange that UG would go and make something like this, but they did experiment with dial colors on these. On the white golds, you have a few special colors, the red, the green, and it's kind of like the Yves Klein of pawn routers.
Yeah. Oh, the color is amazing.
Yeah.
So how many of these do you think exist in the world?
This is the only known with this sub-reference. And I think it's, that to my knowledge, of course, the only known that comes really from the original.
That's real, yeah.
Been one. We've sold another one with my partner at Avocado that is, it was on a more generic sub-reference. But of course, like, we found it like that, so we're not gonna, we're not gonna kill the watch. I think at the time, like, so we met this guy, Italo Bonifacio. He was actually the official watchmaker for UG at the time in Italy.
Wow.
And he was living very close to where my partner lives. And when we sat down and we had a long talk with him, and he told us a bunch of crazy stories about how UG was actually, there was a lot of service dials and things that would come in. And there was a bit of a mix and match when it comes to, like, if you went to the shop and you wanted to buy a pawn router, they would show you another dial option. So maybe you have the wrong sub-reference. And a lot of people are, today with internet, they're quite square when it comes to, it's a -2, it has to be like this.
Yeah.
And for the most part, I would agree with that. But there are little exceptions that you have to always keep into consideration. Like, hey, you got a service, you didn't like the dial, you could change it, sure.
Yeah.
It's a bit like the gray prototype dial that everybody loves and goes crazy about.
Yeah.
Nobody really knows the story. And you do find the dial in the archives.
Yeah.
And he told us that was potentially like either a service dial or something that, like, you could upgrade to that dial. People didn't care so much about originality back then, in the sense that, like, if the brand, after 30 years, your dial is ruined, it was the brand's duty to
replace it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a bit like Rolex. You give your old sub, they will change everything, but because they want a functional watch.
Yeah. And I think even more than that, I mean, I've spoken to so many, 40, 50-year employees of Rolex saying that in the 60s and 70s, like, people would just put stuff together and it would leave the factory. And it's not like anybody asked for it. There was no money involved. But like, those are real watches. It was just a different world where, like, the idea of a catalog wasn't necessarily like a defining thing. It didn't say, okay, it had to be this style, had to be this case. It was just, you put stuff together that looked good.
It was still an industrial process. And it's like with Newmans.
Yeah.
Yes. I think it was a fun thing to offer your client. I think it was one of those things like, oh, you want to upgrade to something a little different? Sure.
Yeah.
Throw it in and but beautiful one.
No, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And so I think I know this watch.
I think you know.
What's this guy?
Wrote it for a reason. So this was one of those grails that I read about on your blog.
Yeah.
Because it was owned by you.
It was. That was my watch.
Yeah, this was your watch. And I didn't even change the strap. I kept it.
Amazing.
In honor. So it's a triple calendar white gold.
14 karat, right?
14 karat
Yeah.
white gold. So for the American market. And I'm actually a huge fan of this case.
Yeah.
So I actually made a little collection. I have a time only, I have a triple calendar, and then a chronograph tri-complex version, all with this case. The other are in yellow, gold, and steel.
Yeah.
One of each material. And there is such a purity in design.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the most just, if you close your eyes, you imagine like a watch, like this case, this everything, just to me makes so much sense.
Yeah.
There's something beautiful about it. And there's, I think, around 5 known, something like this. And yeah, it was one of those like moments. I remember Eric Wynn had it on his website.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, is that Ben's? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, oh God,
Yep.
I have to have it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this was over 10 years ago. This was a while back.
Wow.
But the watch is just extraordinary. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
it's
14
so
karat white gold, and it's so mint. And as you well know, like you just don't find watches this old in this type of condition. And as you say, it's just it's an incredibly elegant thing. And if Universal or any other brand brought back a look like that today, I think people would really get excited.
Yeah, I think so too. There's like purity in design.
Yeah.
The case is the right proportions. Dial layout is crazy, perfectly balanced.
Yeah. That's a great thing.
Yeah. And
really
it's
is.
so crunchy and beautiful. Just something about it.
That's a good watch.
Do you miss it?
I do.
love
Honestly,
it.
I didn't know that you had it. And you see things like this, and it's like, wow, it kind of makes you fall back in love with Universal and these style of watches. I still am into this style, obviously, but I haven't spent as much time kind of like around them, I should say. And man, I mean, this is a good one for sure.
Can I ask you, how come you sold it? It was something.
Life goes on,
Yeah.
I mean, it was one of those things where, I've been around so many watches and such a consumer, and I'm not nearly as wealthy as people think. So it's one of those things where if to buy X, you have to sell Y.
Sure.
And it just came time. And I think also I sold it to Eric, and I think Eric was looking to put some good Universals on his website.
Yeah.
And so I obviously had some.
Sure.
And so I was happy to let it go. And like with everything, like just sometimes there comes a time where it's just like I own this watch for minimum 5 years, probably more than that.
Mm-hmm.
And you just want to own something else.
And you feel like you've understood it, you found it.
No question.
Yeah, I
No
think
question.
that's
And look, there are some Universals that I'll probably never sell. There are some that I would sell.
your favorite.
My favorite, which one?
That you have in your collection.
Oh, my favorite is the Grace, the Pete Fullerton watch, because I mean,
Wow,
so
yeah.
that was one of my
crazy.
first.
I remember the auction, right?
Yeah,
Christie's.
Sotheby's.
Sotheby's,
Yeah. So
Sotheby's.
it was when they sold the first 2497 and all the Fullerton watches. And what's neat about it is obviously I'm an American, and the idea of Pete Fullerton got that watch from his grandfather, Henry Graves. He bought it at Henry Stern. I got my first
Wow.
watch from my grandfather.
So
that's kind of the one. That's the one that
Yeah.
really made me fall in love. Tri-compacts, cool dial. It's kind of beat up. The case is, I think, unpolished, but like the lume in the hand is missing, and it's just kind of it was a worn watch.
Yeah.
I love that one.
the history in that.
Yeah.
Like just the people who have touched that watch.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Yeah,
the stories. Yeah.
Just the idea of Henry Graves, right? Like
possibly the most important collector.
I think, certainly the most most famous American
yeah.
collector, saying like picking that watch to give to his grandson. I mean, just says a lot. And then of course my grandfather giving me his Omega. So that's my favorite one for sure. But look,
understandable.
Corelli split,
Yeah.
the big glossy black Era
Compacts.
compacts.
Oh, wow.
Those are some good ones for sure. So tell me about this tri-compacts.
So, Universal was going towards its last sort of good years.
Yeah.
And this was end of 60s, approaching the quartz crisis. Everything was changing in the horological landscape. And they had a bunch of 281 tri-compacts calibers left. And they said, let's just make a crazy
do it.
70s exotic dial. Something like the world has never seen. So actually, funny enough, it kind of looks like a Zenith. Kind of looks
No
like
question
that
about that.
series of watches, from that year.
It looks just like it.
So the dial was made by Singer, and it has like this very complex, applied markers, 3-4 layers. Like I think this was one of those pieces that just says, this is what the watchmaking industry can do.
Yep.
And like Singer went to like the crazy extent. even the handset. I mean, they're gold hands that have been blacked out to perfection. There is so much interesting details, so many interesting details about this watch. You can just lose yourself. There's so many layers. It's so complex if you think about it. And I think this was the last generation of purely
real universal.
Yeah, this is the last pure UG, but this was a period, Universal would make in-house movements, but they would go to the best case maker, the best dial maker, the best hand maker, and just assemble in-house, which is why I think also watches were beautiful back then, because everybody would focus on making the best part. Whereas today, brands want to make everything in-house. And I think you can make the best if you try to fully verticalize the whole process. I think it's hard, to have the most beautiful handset maker, the most beautiful dial, just the investment on that today is, I think, too much. So I think this, to me, is one of the last purely great mechanical Universal Genèves. And watches in general. I don't think this. I think the 70s, to me, was one of the ultimate periods when it comes to fully analog, as you said, non-CAD made watches. So I think it's kind of Newman exotic variants, gold. There's so much that doesn't make sense about this watch, but when you put it all together,
it really works.
It makes perfect sense. Yeah. And chromatically, they're on another level.
Yeah.
Who made this sort of subdued gray, brown color with gold? It's
the colors are amazing.
Can you imagine the creative process?
Yeah.
I'd love to speak to I would love to be in the room when they decided to say, oh, let's make it these colors, such unusual colors. And
Seriously.
I feel this is one thing I would love to see more today, bigger budgets when it comes to creative directors. I don't think brands are investing in creative directors.
Yeah.
Brands spend so much on marketing, on flying out journalists and this and that.
Yeah.
But nobody's investing on, which brand announced a new creative director and they were proud of it?
I don't think anybody announces a creative director.
Yeah. It's hidden and they don't think about this. But you need somebody with a clear vision of making something beautiful. Who talks about design in such a pure? And I think UG at the time, they were acing this. And this watch to me is the epitome of, let's make something absolutely nonsensical. This is classic.
Yep, that makes sense.
You can find, this, this is beautiful, pure design, but this is just out of any norm.
Yeah.
And they said, let's go against the wave, let's make something crazy. 50 odd years later, how relevant is this?
Yeah, I mean, this is, of all the, obviously I love this watch because it used to be mine, but of all the watches on the table, this is a holy shit watch. This is one that I get excited about seeing.
You guys
even
had
today.
one on Hodinkee shop many years ago.
Many years ago, and is in the family, so to speak.
Yeah, you know?
Yeah. It was with Matthew in Geneva.
Oh,
That
yes,
was
of
his,
course. Yeah.
But this is amazing because it's obviously solid gold, triple calendar with moon phase, chronograph, in a slim, elegant case with the colors, as you say. It's got everything going for it. And it's hard to find. This is a pretty rare watch.
What I love about the watch is it's really you buy a concept here. You buy a mindset that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
This is the best part about this watch. So yeah, big fan of this.
Yeah, and then on the, as you said, Universal, it's not like Rolex. It's not like Patek where you see kind of the same thing over and over again. This is a totally different watch than everything else on the table.
So I'm proud of this watch because it's this is, if the Tri-Complex reflects what Universal is to, this square crazy watch reflects what I am to collecting.
Yeah.
It's not a rare reference. You find these squares. So this is an early bumper movement, mid-50s time-only watch. And then UG said, let's do something unique with this watch. This comes from Switzerland. Pretty sure it's the original owner. It was an old dude. He's have had it all my life, wanted something special. And this is just one of those things that they really didn't have to do this, but they said, let's make it. So they just threw a bunch of beautiful rocks on the bezel. And it's so well made. So it's on the cardinal points, you have square diamonds and then round diamonds. And you have this beautiful white gold handset and logo, because obviously the diamonds are encased in white gold.
Yeah.
So you have this chromatic appeal of the two. And it's just one of those things that I love the idea that there's only one in the world. I've done a million research. I don't think another one exists. And I don't think there was a clientele for this. Even back then, it was hard.
Somebody just decided to make it.
Yeah, and they probably, Hodinkee did this. I have a beautiful pole router that's like fully iced out. And it was a special order for a German doctor.
No kidding.
In the late 50s.
Like the bezel has diamonds on it?
The whole case and bezel. And this was a factory finish.
Wow.
It's on the book. You can see it. And I found that in Germany, again, I bought it not from the original owner, but from the guy who bought it from him.
Yeah.
Crazy collector. And, you know, it's the kind of piece that I think as a collector makes you feel, okay, wow, I've gone the extra mile.
Yeah.
I've gone the extra step. You know, I like the reference. I'm not the craziest fan. But then when you find something so unique, so special, that like only you have, I think, to me, that's a lot what collecting also is about.
Yeah.
Like really just to say, okay, I'm the only one who has it. And it's not an ego thing, but it's just I found that one piece.
Yeah, it's
like
your story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's why I love this one so much.
And so, I mean, you obviously have seen a lot of universals in your day. What is the Holy Grail universal for the community? And then what's your Holy Grail universal?
I think for the community, definitely the split is one of them.
Yeah.
Because also it's such a visually appealing complication.
Yeah.
Personally speaking, there's a couple of pieces. I would love an absolutely perfect Eric Clapton tri-complex, but like spanking mint.
Yeah.
I haven't found the perfect one. I won't lie. Okay, you mentioned it, but like the tri-complex from Henry Graves has always been when I saw it, I read the story, I was like, okay, if there's one almost ultimate grail, probably would be that.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
I know the owner of that one. Yeah.
Hopefully I'll meet him one day. I don't know if it's weird to say, but like I'm kind of I'm at a point where I'm happy with my collection.
Yeah.
I've built. You'll come to Milan. I'd love to show you, but I've built a pretty complete sphere when it comes to all the different models.
Yeah.
I have beautiful time-only pieces. I have some enamel pieces. I have beautiful pole routers. I have nice complications, and I have beautiful pocket watches.
Yeah.
And I think for me, like, just the full 360 circle about the brand was, like, I wanted, if somebody comes and they want to know about the history of Universal, I can put like 10 pieces on the table that like gives you from A to Z, like the complete sphere.
Right.
But yeah, I would say, strangely enough, I'm happy with
That's
my
a good
collection.
thing.
Yeah,
That means you're a happy person.
Yeah, I'm on to, Hodinkee was a very important period of my life.
Yeah.
A few years ago, I think over the last few years, I haven't bought many Hodinkees, probably none. This weekend, funny enough, I bought 3 pole routers.
Did you?
Yeah.
Where did you buy them?
So I was in Munich at a watch show, and this Spanish dude I know, he always finds like barn finds, very mint and very like original. They're like untampered with. He had 3, and I was like, "Can I buy one?" He's like, "No, you have to buy all 3." And I was like, "Oh, whatever." And then the show goes on. There wasn't anything nice, and I was like, "It's been so long. I haven't seen a beautiful pole router out there." So I like bought the 3, and I got home and I had like the same excitement as I had years ago. I was like, damn, they're beautiful. Like, you look at the glossy and you're like, sure.
A good one.
Wanted to hoard them back again.
Yeah, a good pole router with the super glossy dial is hard to beat.
The perfect watch. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I think for me, the grail is always like the piece I haven't seen yet.
Yeah.
Maybe like if I find another like gem set or something really, like a platinum one would be interesting.
Definitely.
I think there's a few platinum time-only pieces. One watch, okay, I'll tell you the one watch I regret the most that I didn't buy. So I'm a big pole router fan.
Sure.
And there was one watch that went for sale at Philips. It was an enamel pole router with San Christopher's that actually Ronnie had bought. He was trying to sell for like nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing relatively speaking, but like nothing compared to what it did at auction.
Yeah.
And I got obsessed with it. Then it went at auction. It got a crazy, like I was underbidder, got a crazy price. And I was like, okay, stop, but one more, but stop, but one more.
Yeah.
And then I lost it, and I don't even know where it is now. And I think to me that would have been like the last missing jigsaw.
That would be the one
piece. So if you're watching and you have that watch, call me.
Mr. A on Instagram.
Mr. A on Instagram, yeah. So I think that would be probably one of the pieces that I feel like I missed and would really want to have. Except for that, I'm pretty I'm happy.
That's a good place to be. So now that Universal has been kind of brought back, we haven't seen any new products yet, but obviously the interest is there because we now know that it's coming back. Has that changed the market for the vintage pieces?
I would say it's definitely created a little buzz, and people started talking about it again. Last few years, it's really been on the low.
Yeah.
Now they've talked about it a little more, although hardcore fans have always been there.
Mm-hmm.
So for sure, there's been a slight revive, and as you know, a lot of speculation feeds off of expectations.
No doubt.
And I don't think we're at the point in which, prices have skyrocketed yet.
Mm-hmm.
But there's consistent interest when it comes to like beautiful, nice vintage UGs, especially when it comes to the 60s, 70s chronographs of shoe models. Those always seem to sell out extremely fast.
Yeah.
And definitely when it comes to Paul Routers, a nice, beautiful example always sells, but there's none on the market. So also I think it's a question of rarity. It's not a brand that produces so much, so I think it's hard for collectors to find a lot of what they have. So when it comes up, it sells.
And so what do you think about the rebirth of Universal, and what do you want them to do as a lover of the brand?
Okay, so I'm extremely excited, like everybody, that the brand got finally revived.
Yeah.
I think it's a incredible project with huge potential.
Sure.
So what I'd like the brand to do is probably something that the brand cannot do. And as you know, as collectors, we also make it easy in our minds, like, oh, just grab this watch and remake it.
Yeah.
But we don't realize there's a huge constraint,
of course,
which is manufacturing process, industrial process. And as you know, we had this nice conversation with Mr. Kern, and he did enlighten us to the fact that there is a lot more behind making a watch than what you'd imagine.
Sure.
And I think when it comes to industrial constraints, what we'd like is not exactly what we'll get. And he did say something that I agree with, that whatever they make, somebody's going to be unhappy.
Yeah.
If they make too vintage, it's going to be just a reedition. If they make too modern, they've lost direction. I think when it comes to UG, what I'd love to see is purity in design. Not try to overcomplicate things, not to throw a date there just to be in the market segment because, it has a sort of complication. I'd like them to focus on beautiful manufacturing process, beautiful details. Like, for example, invest in a crown that's really beautiful.
A crown.
Like, no brand today is making nice crowns.
Yeah.
We went to visit one of the manufacturing processes that makes most of the crowns. They just throw a little crown stamp. Like, it's lacking like the same like the feel of this crown, the teeth, how it feels in the hands. Like, you don't get that today.
Yeah.
Watches that are not too big, watches that have a good feel on the wrist, good proportions. But I don't know if I'm talking to a niche of people like us who are real geeks and they get it.
Yeah.
And I think the brand still has to sell to masses. But I feel like you can still sell to masses and sell a beautiful product.
I think you can. I think it's hard at times,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, I think I have a very clear memory of actually somebody that was with us yesterday. I was out with him once, and he said, "Oh man, like AP must be really struggling to sell those Black Panther watches." This was when Black Panther came out.
Sure.
And if you go on our site, if you go on Instagram, people just flamed that watch. They said this is the dumbest thing ever, and neither here nor there. And I said, "Oh man, I'm not so sure about that." So I texted a friend of mine who's an AP dealer, and they said, "Oh no, like we sold those out within the first hour, and now they're trading for 2.5 times retail."
Wow.
And it's just like the community that we represent is so oftentimes not in lockstep with the greater market. And I think it's a real struggle to make something beautiful that sells. I mean, there are very few brands that can do it really elegantly and successfully. It's hard to do, but let's hope they can figure it out.
I hope so too. And I think they still have good direction. They know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Just hope they'll keep it simple, keep it beautiful. Look to their past as a form of inspiration, and maybe also with some innovative elements. But they have the most amazing backstory and heritage. So I think they have incredible potential.
Yeah.
So we'll see.